Hello everyone, and welcome back to What If Shadow of War Was Good. If you haven't seen the first part, I recommend going back to that video or else you're going to be lost for a few different reasons, but chief among them being the framing for my rather flammable video title. Seriously, without context, this won't make any sense. Also, once again, this really is just speculative fanfiction, don't take it too seriously. Last time, we established the core issue I have with the Shadow of War games. The story is mediocre fanfiction at the best of times when it comes to Tolkien's world, and downright disrespectful at worst. On top of this, I explained there was one idea that was rather interesting that didn't resort to a whole lot, that being Talion wearing one of the 9 Rings of Man. Lastly, I stated how I'd prefer this game to be an open-world RPG like The Witcher 3 as opposed to an open-world action-adventure game, since it's a crying shame we have the setting of Middle-earth, but we really don't get to interact with it. The story got a complete overhaul. Instead of following a ranger of the Black Gate on his quest for vengeance in the Third Age, we followed a Numenorian soldier as he attempts to secure a beachhead for his people's invasion while protecting the people of Eregion during the War of Elves and Sauron in the Second Age. I'm serious when I say you should watch the first part if you haven't already. You'll be extremely lost otherwise, so consider this your final warning. Link to the first part will be in the description. In part 1, I touched upon a brief summary of the events that will transpire, that being a conflict that takes place somewhere between 3320 to 3400 of the Second Age in the region of Eriador. The game would be aptly titled Shadows over Eriador. The conflict would be original and would be, at least at first, between the newly formed Dunedain kingdoms and a vast horde of orcs from the north being led by the Nazgul. The idea here is right after the destruction of Numenor, thanks to Sauron's manipulation and influence, the Nazgul under their master's orders attack the fledgling Dunedain kingdom of the north, Arnor, with the intent of completely wiping out the once proud Numenorians. Keep in mind that most of the Dunedain that fled with Elendil are in fact Numenorians. They're from that isle, with Dunedain meaning men of the west, but at this time referring to those who are friendly with the elves and faithful to the Valar. Their Numenorians is what I'm getting at. There will be more to this plot, however there are 2 key things I want to cover before touching on it proper, those 2 being Talion's characterization and companions. Going off of that, last video we had the story end with an epilogue that involved Talion suffering a catastrophic death, one that will take time for him to come back from, at the hands of the 8 Nazgul, bearing in mind Talion is technically the 9th, hence why there's one missing. This is important because the Nazgul are going to be the main antagonists of this game and have multiple personal connections to Talion. 2 of them used to be Numenorians, which will hit Talion hard because they traded in their own people for power. More on this later. As a whole, the 8 represent what Talion is going to become if he isn't careful, or if enough time passes. By giving Talion one of the rings, we organically create nemeses that will keep popping up that have emotional weight behind them. To touch on the plot rather briefly, the game is going to open up with the destruction of Numenor, the land Talion is from, the land he fails to protect. He's going to come face to face with the 2 Nazgul from Numenor and fight them right before the Isle meets its end. Talion, after some time, will reawaken in Middle-earth with the trauma of his greatest failure. One of the core ideas to Tolkien's works is this idea of nostalgia, individuals and groups alike longing for days that have long since passed, be it the elves who long for Valinor and the peace of the days before Melkor's wars, be it the dwarves who long for the glory days and the homes they've lost to the orcs, be it the Dunedain who long for Numenor, or the men of Gondor who long for the days of the Dunedain. Hell, be it the orcs of the Third Age who long for the days of simple raiding before Sauron's war. Everyone is longing for the past, and so too is Talion. By this point in Talion's life, he is about 1,400 years old. He's probably the oldest man to ever live by this point, even by Numenorian standards, with the possible exception of Elrond's half-brother, who was the first king of Numenor, but details. All of his friends have long since died. The land he sacrificed so much for is gone, and now, what makes him a man is slowly slipping away. I can hear the chuckles, so to clarify what I mean by this, Talion more or less looks like the Nazgul Talion from Shadow of War. His skin is a sickly greenish gray color, his eyes are yellow, and he just has this overall aesthetic of a Sith Lord. Beyond just his appearance, Talion no longer has to eat, drink, or sleep, nor can he. Nothing has any taste. Sleep is physically impossible. Basically, he can't get pleasure from anything anymore. Talion longs for the days of his youth, before the ring. He longs for the majesty of Numenor. He longs for the days of simple pleasures he used to pay no mind to. And he now longs for his own death. However, as the prologue ends and the game begins proper, the ring keeping Talion alive, as well as the finger that bore it, no longer exists in the physical world. It's in the Wraith world, and Talion can no longer remove it, which means his fate is sealed. Now, how the player chooses to portray Talion will be left up to them in dialogue, and the choices they make. However, Talion's longing for the past will stick with him, and will only get stronger until something critical happens that changes his views. I'll get to this much later. Moving on to companions and what exactly they'll do. I'll state this bluntly, Talion's army of orcs still exists, as does the Nemesis system. The companions will just be those who actively follow the player and have more story to their characters. In a similar vein to CRPGs, if you don't like any of the companions, you can ignore them and fight on your own, or kick them to the curb and bring on a warchief or two as a companion. As of right now, I can't think of how many companions there will be. However, I have two lined up that will be rather important for the future. Much like Ratbag in the vanilla game, who was used as the tutorial warchief and had an impact upon the story, these two characters will serve a similar role. Because I'm incredibly bad at naming characters, we're just going to refer to these two as the Tulare and the White Orc. The Tulare is an elven woman from the Tulare clan of elves, who are traditionally known for their love of the sea. The Tulare, referring to the elven woman now, was present during the Noldor's kinslaying of her clan when the Noldor attempted to leave Valinor. This incident left a deep emotional scar on her that is yet to heal, and is central to who she is as a person, much like Talion and the destruction of Numenor. The Tulare is the first person to find Talion washed up on shore after the destruction of Numenor. She takes him to safety and, to the best of her ability, nurses Talion back to health. She'll act in some regards as a tutorial to aspects of the game the prologue skipped out on. She then mentions that she is traveling north due to the sudden influx of orcs heading that way. Something is happening, and she wants to know what. At this point, Talion can decide to go with her or head out on his own. Regardless, the Tulare will reappear every now and again due to having a vested interest in what is going on. The main core of Talion's relationship with the Tulare comes down to their longing for better days. Through conversation, it will be discovered that the Tulare lost her family during the kinslaying of the Noldor, and that because of this, she can't bring herself to go, let alone stay in Valinor. Basically, Talion and the Tulare are kindred spirits, which can lead to a relationship which is left up to the player to develop. Instead of being a mage or some sort of lore master, which seems to pop up a lot in games like this, she's an archer. Her role in gameplay is to provide ranged support and do out-of-combat healing. Moving on to the second companion, the White Orc. The White Orc, much like Ratbag, will be the player's reintroduction or introduction to the warchief recruitment system. Remember, this isn't based off of domination. However, instead of being a warchief, he will remain a personal companion to Talion. This is mostly done to allow the player full customization and choice when it comes to their chiefs. Talion finds the White Orc not long after beginning to travel north, be it with the Tulare or not. The White Orc has been left for dead and is surrounded by the bodies of his former band. They have been killed by a rival group of orcs. Talion comes upon the White Orc and sees, once again, a kindred spirit. For all intents and purposes, Talion and the White Orc are creatures of shadow, of evil. However, in spite of that, both have lost people who are dear to them, showing that there is something good still within them. The White Orc attacks Talion, and here we are given the tutorial for recruiting war chiefs. Basically, this comes down to Talion kicking the ever-living hell out of the White Orc, then offering him a hand at friendship as well as a chance at closure. The White Orc takes it, and they go after the rival group of orcs that killed his band, and here we go through the tutorial of drawing out as well as killing war chiefs. Past this, the White Orc offers to join Talion on whatever his quest is going to be in order to get revenge against the shadow that was calling him to arms. Once again, the player can accept or refuse. However, the White Orc is going to continue his fight, so he will keep popping up like the Tulare if the player refuses. The core idea behind Talion's relationship with the White Orc is him teaching the Orc a better way, that the Orc isn't defined by what he is, but rather what he does. Basically, Talion sets the White Orc down a path of redemption as Talion continues slowly marching towards his own damnation. With all of that out of the way, there is a little bit of housekeeping. Powers. One of the things I find aggravating about the sequels to RPGs is when you're playing the same character and having to start all the way back at level 1. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't make sense, and I am not a fan. So for this, Talion will have the stats, in terms of level up, at the max they were at by the end of the first game. However, that doesn't mean there still isn't room to improve. Because of the escalation of conflict, there's going to be more and stronger enemies for Talion to fight, which means he needs to improve, allowing for more crazy things the player can pick up to occur at level up. However, there is another added facet beyond just typical RPG stuff. Now, there's Wraith Powers. I forgot to mention this last video, but Talion would not have any crazy powers in the first game, outside of coming back to life, because that's a given, because he is just a regular human being. With that said, Ring Wraiths won't have powers either, unlike Shadow of War proper, because they never had them in the books. The reason why Talion has powers is because he is stuck between both worlds. A part of him exists within the Wraith world, like the Nazgul, however the bulk of him still lingers. This will be the explanation for why he has powers and why he has them now. Now, finally, moving on to the story. Like the previous video, this game will have a multitude of side quests that tie into the story at large. As I stated previously, the main focus of this game will be about an original conflict that is between the newly formed Kingdom of Arnor and the Nazgul, who are leading a vast army of orcs with the intent of destroying this fledgling kingdom. The idea here is that Sauron put plans into motion to completely wipe out the Numenorians, including those that are on and fled to mainland Middle-earth. The conflict itself will be kept at the northernmost border of Arnor, and eventually push even farther north as Talion takes the fight to the Nazgul. Essentially, the conflict doesn't become something historians make a note of because Talion is able to prevent it from getting out of hand in the first place. For all intents and purposes, the game map, which is most of, if not all of Eriador, truncated naturally, is divided into two very distinct parts. The first being the front line where most of the conflict and mass-scale battles are taking place, the second being the rest of Eriador, where again there is a host of side quests and other fun roleplay possibilities. Unlike the previous game, only a small section of Eriador is at war, however that doesn't mean its impacts aren't felt across the land. Upon going north, Talion and those with him discovered the growing army of orcs in the mountains around this position of the map by the Entimors, or what would become the Entimors. Talion spots a black rider among them and realizes that it's a Nazgul, something most people in Middle-earth aren't really aware of as of yet. He knows what that means for the people of Eriador, and more specifically, the newly formed Kingdom of Arnor. War is coming. Fearing the complete destruction of his people, Talion makes his way to the still under construction capital city of Arnor, Numenor. Along the way, orcs will begin attacking the northernmost part of Arnor's border, and I will state that during this journey, there will be a number of side quests so that it isn't just a linear walk from one place to another. After reaching Numenor, Talion meets with Elendil, the High King of the Dunedain, and warns him of what is coming. At first, Talion's appearance is off-putting, but Elendil recounts a tale he heard from when he was a child. He states that long ago there was a Numenorian who was banished from death. Instead of abusing his gift, the man donned a dreadful visage and became the Gravewalker, a hero doomed to a torturous existence. Once that exchange finishes, Elendil becomes receptive to what Talion has to say, and states that the Dunedain are stretched thin. He'll send what he can to defend the north, but he just doesn't have enough soldiers. Upon hearing this, Talion offers his aid to Elendil, which he accepts before departing. At this point, the game opens up completely, and much like the first game, there's a hidden gauge that will unlock the next major section of the story. Talion's main goal is to liberate the 4 regions of Northern Arnor and 4 regions of Northern Eriador, total of 8, that are under Orc control. What he has to do is kill or turn war chiefs to his cause in a bid to draw out the Nazgul that control the region. Much like the last game, the number of side quests, war chiefs you kill, and strength of your Orc army will determine how the region fares by the end of the game. This time around, however, side quests can lead to new companions, and Talion has an actual pressing reason to form an Orc army. If the White Orc isn't a companion, then he comes to the player with a force of Orcs that will make up the initial army, where he becomes your second in command, where if he was recruited, you get a quest to pick up these Orcs. On top of this, the White Orc states he found a suitable location away from both their enemies and the men that fear them, for a permanent camp in the north. The location of this camp will one day be the location of Carn Dûm, the fortress of the Witch King of Angmar. From now, we're going to refer to this camp as Red Rock, since Carn Dûm roughly translates to Red Mansions. One of the main draws of this game will be fighting the Nazgul. Once you liberate a region, that Nazgul becomes free to do as they please after you kill them the first time. Basically, a Nazgul is locked in place until you defeat them the first time. From there on out, they become reoccurring enemies that adapt and grow stronger after each time you kill them, much like the war chiefs. The only difference being, however, is you can't actually kill these guys forever. They will keep popping up. Should note too, that the initial duels with them will be crazy set pieces where you can get a lot of roleplay from how Talion feels about the whole situation. Perhaps he looks at the Nazgul with pity and wants to help them, or he views them beyond redemption for giving in and betraying the people they were supposed to serve. This time around, the hidden gauge that moves the story forward will more or less represent your army's strength in comparison to the Nazgul. If you've taken most, if not all, the regions belonging to the Nazgul and raised a powerful army, then your strength will be incredibly high. To represent this visually, without displaying the bar, your war camp of Red Rock will go from a site with a wooden palisade and some tents, to a sprawling fortress with walls of red stone. Want to state this isn't Carn Dûm, because that's built in the Third Age. Instead, it's a different fortress in the same location, whose days are very much numbered. To add on to this, if you've done several side quests across Eriador, then your Orcs will take on a more man-like appearance with their war gear. The idea being, the people of Eriador are sending you arms in your war against the Nazgul. At first, your Orcs will look like Orcs with their rather crude looking arsenal. However, over time, they'll begin to look like the Northmen. Think Rohan or Dale or even real-world Saxons. And by the end, they'll look like, to an extent, the soldiers of Arnor. Once a certain threshold is reached, Talion will call a war council and propose an assault upon the Nazgul's main fortress in the mountains in order to end the conflict with one decisive battle, forcing the Orcs that flock to the Nazgul's cause to disperse. At this point, you'll be given an option: attack with the forces you have now, or hold off and build up. Much like the first game, if you attack half-cocked, you're gonna have a bad time. This mission will have 2 main stages: the assault upon the Nazgul's fortress and the defense of Red Rock. When your forces attack, a massive battle will begin that will be determined by your army's strength. If you immediately rush this battle without taking time to build, then your forces and the forces of the enemy are gonna kill each other at a ratio of 1 to 1. But if you did build up, let's say as much as you could, the battle is an absolute slaughter. Your soldiers are just butchering the enemy Orcs. However, the end result is more or less the same. The Nazgul call in the hordes of Orcs they've been keeping out of the war and counterattack. Their numbers are vast, and you're forced to retreat. How much you built up will determine how many orcs both sides lose, and will determine how screwed Northern Eriador is. Build up a ton, then Eriador is in a better position now than it was at the start, and you take a few casualties. If the opposite is true, then it's just a bad time all around. Your forces are forced to retreat to Red Rock. However, a large section of the Nazgul's army is in pursuit. Now, inversely, if you built up very little, then the army that chases you is rather small. However, you're defending a wooden palisade. If you built up a ton, then the army is massive, with most of this new force just trying to kill you. But you do have the added advantage of defending a literal fortress. At this point, you're forced to fight off a siege at Red Rock, Lord of the Rings style, where you as the player will make several choices on how to go about the defense that will determine how hard later stages are. Defend really well and make the right choices, then it's easy. Don't do that and it's gonna be hard. As the battle rages, however, Talion hears the sounds of strange horns coming from the north. He runs to get a better look at who it is, and in the distance, he can see a vast army bearing a white banner with a gray, dead tree. He doesn't know who they are, and holds his breath as this army decides the fate of the battle. If they assist the army of orcs, they're doomed. However, if they're allies, then the day can be won. This army thunders down the hill and engages the enemy orcs with a savage ferocity. Talion rallies his army and they sally forth, destroying the besieging force. The day is won. When Talion greets these unexpected allies, he witnesses something he just can't comprehend. The army that came to his aid are orcs. More specifically, orcs led by a chieftain named Ratbag the 21st. The orcs that fought alongside Talion over 1,000 years ago have returned to aid their now mythological figure. It won't be gone into too much detail, however this new Ratbag explains that after the War of Elves and Sauron, the orcs that fought alongside Talion rallied other orcs into one giant clan and went north to the wastes of Forodwaith. Hope I said that right. Where they built up their own civilization away from the prying eyes of the Shadow, as well as the Free Peoples. They heard the call to arms from Sauron's minions, and figured their great Gravewalker would be there, fighting against them. From here on out, Talion, his companions, his army, and the Wasteland Orcs, as I'm going to call them, continue their fight against the Nazgul. This section of the game will be easy if you built up due to the massive decrease in enemy forces. However, it will be much harder if you didn't. You respond to the Nazgul counterattack, and once again, drive them back, leading to a climactic last battle at the Nazgul's fortress, resulting in the Ring Wraiths being defeated, and peace returning to Eriador. Talion finally catches a break and wins. Past this point, we dip into the epilogue. However, before I get there, a few things. First, I speak in wide, sweeping generalities because I want this game to be as open as possible. To be an RPG one can get lost in, hence why the main plot is rather bare bones. It's there to tie the gameplay as well as the characters and world together. Second, Talion discovering that the orcs he fought with long ago went off and created their own civilization is the moment that changes him from wanting to just die already to a man with renewed purpose. Despite failing with Numenor, he still did something great, and that brings him back from the brink. At the epilogue, the White Orc and the rest of Talion's army follow the Wasteland Orcs north and join their civilization. Past this, we jump forward where the player fights alongside the Tulare, fully leveled up, in the War of the Last Alliance. Very similar to the first game. He helps Anarion, Elendil's second son, defend Minas Ithil, which foreshadows some of the things you can expect in the third and final game. That's all I got for you guys for this part. I've been Boofire191. I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, don't take this too seriously. It really is just speculative fan fiction. Don't get your knickers in a twist. If you've made it this far, you probably haven't gotten your knickers in a twist. But, you know, just want to say that. Again, thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've been Boofire191. I'll see all of you next time. Goodbye.